You know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump. How bad is it, Secretary Van Houten?
We're broke.
Remember when The Simpsons was able to predict the future? Over the course of its many seasons, the show has anticipated a startling amount of historic moments in perfect detail. But all the most prescient prophecies come from old episodes. Nothing modern has been able to predict future events. So, what's going on here? Did Matt Groening lose his supernatural precognitive abilities? Did he break his crystal ball? Well, no, but he and The Simpsons writers used to have a creative superpower that they've severely lacked in recent years.
You tried your best, and you failed miserably. The lesson is, never try.
When Groening unveiled The Simpsons on The Tracey Ullman Show in 1987, their goal was to provide a heightened, sardonic take on suburban American life. Back then, the Simpsons family were more caricatures than characters, and the story of their lives were told through animated shorts. Audiences loved the shorts, but they weren't big on The Tracey Ullman Show. Ratings floundered, and it only took a couple of years for The Simpsons to start seeking a home of their own at Fox.
Marge, turn on the juice! What do you think, kids?
Nice try, Dad.
Almost immediately, it became clear that The Simpsons were something special, not just because of the charm, wit, and relatability of the characters, but because Groening seemed to be a time traveler with his very own sports almanac. The first mainstream example of The Simpsons' impressive future sight came in 1992, just 3 years after the show debuted on Fox. The season 3 episode Lisa the Greek correctly predicted that the Washington Commanders, known at the time as the Washington Redskins, would beat the Buffalo Bills at that year's Super Bowl.
Washington Redskins win Super Bowl 26.
Reportedly, the showrunners decided to redub the episode leading up to several other Super Bowls, and Lisa's predictions ended up being correct every time. And when it comes to sports, The Simpsons has touched on a lot more than just football. The 2010 episode Boy Meets Curl predicted the 2018 American curling team's victory over Sweden. The 2014 episode You Don't Have to Live Like a Referee predicted that year's FIFA World Cup outcome, as well as a more sinister corruption scandal in the organization. Of course, it's not just sports either. There are an overwhelming amount of Simpsons gags that have made it into our reality in one way or another. But whether or not those gags count as proper predictions depends on how strict you are about the details. The Simpsons has touched on some moments in pop culture and American history with surprising exactitude, and they're just too eerily perfect to deny. In 1993, a season 5 episode showed the famous magicians Siegfried and Roy getting mauled by one of their performing tigers. A decade later, in 2003, the prophecy was tragically fulfilled when Roy was attacked on stage by a tiger. The ordeal severed the carotid artery and caused permanent damage to his verbal and motor skills. But of course, the most notorious example is from the year 2000. The season 11 episode Bart to the Future sees Lisa become the president of the United States. And while America has yet to have its first female leader, The Simpsons did get one major thing right. They predicted that Donald Trump would eventually find himself in the Oval Office. Despite him being little more than a public-facing businessman at the time, The Simpsons somehow reached into the future and pulled this strange fact from our reality 16 years before it happened.
The country is broke? How can that be?
Well, remember when the last administration decided to invest in our nation's children? Big mistake.
And yet, even after all these amazing feats of foresight, the show couldn't see its own slow descent into irrelevance coming. As of recording this video, the last episode we can charitably credit with a correct prediction came out in 2017, 8 years ago. In the season 28 episode, The Great Fatsby, Homer and Mr. Burns attend a party thrown by in-universe hip-hop musician Jay-Z with an all-white theme. Today, people point to this moment as a prediction of Diddy's white parties, which have been in the news for all the wrong reasons. And while it's true that the aesthetic of the scene could be construed as a reference, nothing else about it seems to be as prophetic as some of The Simpsons' previous premonitions. Believers might argue that we just have to give it some more time. Maybe the episodes from the 2020s are predicting events from the distant 2030s. But let's remember that the show used to be able to forecast future happenings in the same year they occurred, like with so many of their sports episodes. If the predictions did come to fruition years later, they tended to be much more specific, like in the case of Bart to the Future. These new episodes just don't have the same magic, and there's a simple explanation for it. The Simpsons isn't relevant anymore.
I don't see any magic. and not a hint of mischief.
So let's revisit Groening's original goal for The Simpsons. He wanted to explore the American suburbs, but more specifically, he wanted to explore the modern American suburbs. He was creating a show for an audience in the late 1980s and 90s, so he and his creative team filled the episodes with world news, current events, and pop culture references that the audience would recognize, and they weren't just shoved in for surface-level jokes either. Groening and the rest of the creative team were in their 30s when The Simpsons started airing on Fox. They were in tune with the politics, social issues, and celebrity gossip of the day, and as the show ventured on, young and talented showrunners took The Simpsons in fresh directions. Al Jean and Mike Reiss were largely responsible for the third and fourth seasons. Their specific brand of biting commentary helped keep the show's forward momentum moving. Even after the pair departed to co-create their own animated series, The Critic, their effect was still being felt. With their guiding principles, the show's team used their increasingly popular TV series as a platform to speak on trending topics in fun and experimental ways. Like seasons 5 and 6 showrunner David Merkin, who wrote Deep Space Homer and can be credited for the show's turn to the surreal. And that sort of creative energy is the reason for these apparent future predictions. In their effort to make relevant statements, The Simpsons writers took some big swings, but they were always rooted in the cultural zeitgeist of the moment. Anyone who follows football would be able to make an educated guess on what team might win that year's Super Bowl, and it doesn't take a fortune teller to look at Siegfried and Roy in the 90s and draw ominous conclusions about their ultimate fate.
Wow. Now that I know all this, isn't there any way to change the future?
No, but try to look surprised.
Even The Simpsons' most famous foretelling, the Trump presidency, wasn't without forewarning. Depending on your age, you might not remember that back in 1999, a year before Bart to the Future aired, Trump was already toying with the idea of running for office. The Simpsons episode was obviously riffing off of that bit of news, and the writers had no way of knowing just how accurate their joke would become all those years later. They were just having fun and trying to write a solid episode, and that's the real superpower at play here. All it takes is a little curiosity and awareness of the world around you to see patterns in our news cycle. So it makes sense that the writers for a show dedicated to modern storytelling would end up looking like all-seeing prophets from time to time. Today, The Simpsons isn't so much an entertaining TV show as it is a cultural institution. It's the longest-running sitcom in American history, with its 36th season airing in 2025. And unfortunately, anyone who's watching a newer episode can tell you the quality has dropped significantly, despite the return of Al Jean beginning in season 13. With Jean in his 60s and Groening now in his 70s, the show has lost that curious and relevant spirit that turned it into a phenomenon in the first place. Modern Simpsons isn't interested in making prescient statements about our cultural climate. It's more concerned with conserving and repeating the most formulaic version of its own episodes so it can stay on the air as long as possible while doing as little work as necessary. It plays it unbearably safe with thoughtless setups and lukewarm jokes we've heard a million times before.
Hey, has anyone seen my lady parts? Come on, somebody grab my lady parts.
They're meant to be evergreen, but they end up being completely unmemorable. The Simpsons lost its ability to predict the future because the show itself has become more predictable than ever. And well, that's all we have for you today. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think The Simpsons is still relevant, or has it become a relic of a bygone era? And which of the show's predictions do you find the most compelling? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Nerdstalgic so you don't miss what we put out next.